Gentlemen, we are live and the announcement has been made. We know the 26 players who will be representing Canada at Qatar 2022. Hello to everyone who's joining us here live on One Soccer's YouTube channel. We'll be taking some questions. We'll be reading some comments because I'm sure you're just as excited as we are. We are a week to go to the start of the World Cup. Canada's first game goes the 23rd against Belgium. Andy Petrillo, Christian Jack, Gareth Wheeler, Oliver Platt. Let me begin with you, KJ. Just overall takeaways from a roster where I don't think there were many surprises, maybe one, which is a little bit heartbreaking, but where one door closes, another one opens for a player. But your overall thoughts on the roster?
Yeah, we'll get individually in a second. Overall, not too many surprises. I found myself quite emotional this morning. I don't know about you guys. We're going to spend the next month talking about outcomes and qualification pathways and performances on the field, but none of that mattered today. It was the culmination of a footballing journey for 26 individuals who've made it to the World Cup to represent this country, and so many of them have had been linked by so difficult times that they never even imagined they'd ever get to this stage, right? So we were all blessed and fortunate to cover all of these qualification process games in this process to get to this stage. This is what it was all about, and for me, that's my overall take from today, was just to see what it meant to these players, even players like Kamal Miller, Alistair Johnston, that quite frankly we all knew were shoo-ins, but never took it for granted this moment, never took that moment for granted. And Ollie, that's certainly what I took from it right now.
Yeah, it was nice. And, it feels like a long time ago, right? That Jamaica game that they secured qualification, and the feeling we all felt that day, of the team completing that process. And today was another one of those moments, I think, where, like KJ said, you just think back on some of the stories of these players, whether it's some of the older players who, haven't had opportunities in this country, haven't had a lot of success with this national team, and now get to represent the team at the World Cup, to some of the younger ones who, have come from very humble beginnings in their careers in a lot of cases, whether it's been college, whether it's been semi-professional football, whatever the case may be. To now playing, representing their country at a World Cup is a pretty special thing. So, yeah, it was a very nice moment this morning to hear from some of those players, to see the excitement on their faces. It's a special thing they're going to get to do over these next few weeks.
Yeah, to me, it was like kind of fill in the blank, because you were wondering when Canada qualified for that World Cup, what that squad would actually look like. And it seemed such a distant possibility for so long. Even today, when the names are going on, I'm like, the journey and the path that these players have taken to get to this point is just absolutely ridiculous. Even at the start of 2021 and the start of this qualifying campaign, 20 long games. And as much as I'm celebrating the 26 players who were named, their families, their support systems, their previous clubs at youth level that have, so many people have played a role in their path. I actually feel for some of the players that did play a role in qualifying that will be missing out on the World Cup. Obviously, we understand the injuries to Crepeau and Kennedy and Henry, but there's other players that did play a role over the course of those 20 qualifying games. Brim, Schavelberg, Broguillard, players like that who are very much part of this group, but just the nature of it, the way that the 26-player squad goes, that inevitably some names are going to be left off and some hearts are going to be broken. Good thing for some of those players, they're very young and they will be able to play a role come 2026. But the squad, just about as expected, a lot of excitement around the possibility of what they can do. I think there's a lot of question marks about how they will play as well, and what this group will look like when they come together, and whether they're going to be, the word they're throwing out there is fearless. It's easy to say right now when the big bright lights are on you, you're playing Belgium, Croatia, Morocco. That's a whole different story. So we're looking forward to seeing how all this comes together in the coming days.
Already seeing some great questions and some great comments coming through. We're going to get to them, that's for sure. Already being asked, does One Soccer not have the World Cup games? No, but we were very proud to be a part of the World Cup qualifying games and see Canada get to this point, to see these players named. A lot of people expressing, obviously, gentlemen, really disappointed and crushed for Daniil Henry, because he really brought that sandpaper to this team. For how many years did we say Canada was getting CONCACAF? They were getting pushed around. And then he kind of brought that sandpaper finally to the team. He showed the team, let's go. I'm here to defend you. We all remember that Panama game. Panama had a corner kick. He's on the sideline warming up. He doesn't get out of the way of the kicker. there's a little brouhaha. Anytime I can use that word, I will. That he started, and the players loved it. He even said the amount of guys coming up to him saying, thanks for doing that. Thanks for sticking up for us. He will be missed. But again, you can look on the flip side and say, oh my goodness, what a story for Joel Waterman. I mean, we're talking 2019, he was in the Canadian Premier League. And here he is now being named to a World Cup roster. And I know we're going to talk about Joel a little later because we're going to go through each of the players here quickly before we start getting to everyone's questions and comments. So let's go by position. Let's begin with the man, Milan Borjan. And you said it, Wheels. You got to give a shout out to guys who, because of injury, will not be here. Max Crepeau filled in brilliantly during times when Milan Borjan couldn't play. Really helped this team qualify for the World Cup. But who could forget some of these brilliant saves by Milan Borjan? The Grey Pants are in the Hamilton Hall of Fame. Where do you think he'll be at this stage? How do you think he'll perform, Wheels?
Well, Borjan, just through World Cup qualifying, became an absolute star in this team. Like the form that he's experienced just in terms of the rise of prominence in the team since disappointment in the Gold Cup against Haiti, where he personally took responsibility for that 3-2 loss, to where we are today. He's now become a household name. He's become a leader in this team. He's become reliable. And that was the biggest question about him before. There was no question that he was going to be the number one heading into this World Cup. And we hope that form through World Cup qualifying translates to the World Cup as well. This is a player that's played in the Champions League, played in the Europa League, played against top strikers. And that's exactly what he's going to have to do in this World Cup. And he's going to have to be an absolute rock that he was during qualifying.
Yeah, I think a very good goalkeeper at any time, a very experienced goalkeeper, obviously, but also someone who, given that purpose of taking Canada to a World Cup and going through qualifying and feeling like he was part of something bigger by doing that, I think that took his game to another level. He was one of the players who really thrived, I think, when given that sense that they were doing something that is really going to last in history and be remembered in their home country. So you're hoping that he kind of captures that kind of imagination again. Going into this World Cup, like Wheels said, he is going to be needed. He will be tested, I think, at this tournament. There's no question about that with the quality of opponents they're going up against. And Canada will need their goalkeeper to be exceptional, I think, if they're going to have a chance of getting results in this group. Yeah,
I like that word, exceptional. He's got to be exceptional. I know quickly before St. Clair, he's going to face opponents that he's faced in the Champions League as well, and he's used to that as well, Andy.
Yeah.
Well, how about Dayne St. Clair? We're looking at him right now. He becomes the number 2 with Max Crepeau out with the broken leg. Do you think, KJ, that Dayne will see any minutes in Qatar?
Well, I think most Canadians would certainly hope not. And that's no disrespect to Dayne St. Clair. He's an outstanding young player. And I think he will play big minutes for Canada going forward in Gold Cups and qualifiers to come and Nations League potentially. But look, for any scenario to break down here, it means an injury to either the number one or a suspension or something. That's the only way you're keeping Milan Borjan off the pitch for the games in Qatar. So, look, do I think that he would be fine if he gets the opportunity? I do think he would be fine, but it's a massive step down, no doubt about it. It's not, Maxime Crepeau has played at the Gold Cup. He's played considerable minutes. Where I think if we were sitting here having this conversation right now, that if Milan Borjan had any kind of issues in the World Cup, be it injury or suspension, would be have no problem with Max Crepeau. There is a level down, a significant level down, just because of experience with Dayne. Yeah. But he is a very talented goalkeeper. I'm delighted he's got his opportunity, and I think mentally he's ready for this next task. Like we talked on Friday's broadcast, that every game he goes in, he has to now be prepared to play, which previously wouldn't have been the case if he was a third stringer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do you want to comment on him, or I want to move to James Pantemis? Yeah. So he's rounding out the 3 here, James Pantemis. And I mean, is this somebody else, Ollie, that, you're looking at maybe a year ago, and would you have thought he'd make the roster?
No, probably not. And it's someone who's, had a very strong end to the season, I think, that is given him that chance to be on the roster. Okay, ultimately you're benefiting from someone else's misfortune with Max Crepeau obviously getting injured and creating a space there. But there's a number of goalkeepers you could have talked about a few months ago who I think would have been in the running for that spot if another spot opened up, right? From Sebastian Breza, who was starting for Montreal, to Thomas Hasal in Vancouver. Even someone like Marco Carducci has been involved in the men's national team camps previously as well. And I think it's a credit to James Pantemis and the strength of his performances over the past few months that he has put himself in that picture of, if there is a fourth goalkeeper needed, he I think has emerged pretty clearly as the guy now and deserves to be on that plane as a result.
In 2020, James Pantemis was with Valor of the Canadian Premier League on loan. Each and every one of these players has a different path. Milan Borjan had to travel across the world to get his chance. Dane Sinclair played NCAA football before being drafted into Major League Soccer. Pantemis, wasn't getting first team action with CF Montreal and went to the Canadian Premier League. This is what's so critical, so vital to providing multiple pathways, different ways for players to reach that level. So full credit to each one of them for finding their own path in order to get to this point.
Let's make our way now to the defenders, and Richie Laryea, who really made a name for himself too on this Canadian squad. This is somebody who was just looking for a team to show some faith in him, and Toronto FC did just that. We know he also tried his hand, gentlemen, at going to Europe, but then ended up coming back to Toronto on loan. There has been some questions around all MLS players when it comes to lack of minutes. So, KJ, where are you with Richie Laryea and his ability to play in that right fullback position?
Yeah, I think he's got a real chance to start the first game, but I think, again, they need to see whether he gets that chance against Japan. I think Junior Hoilett played again for Reading on the weekend, and he's playing really well, by the way. And Hoilett is now somebody that is considerably, I think, somebody who could take over from Richie Laryea in that right-hand wing spot if they're going to play that system. But the thing is, for me, is if Richie Laryea reached the level that he played at in World Cup qualifying, it takes Canada to another level. Richie Laryea has only played 90 minutes 9 times this year, but we don't talk enough about what a terrific player he is. There's a reason why they haven't picked Raheem Edwards today, because Laryea can play left side and right side, right? So that gives you another ability to play another player in another position. He can play right back. He can play forward. He tucks it into central midfield. When he's at his actual peak, and I don't think we've seen it yet for a long time now, because for lots of different reasons, he's a game changer for Canada. He brings that pace. No one talks about pace for Richie Laryea, because on this team, if you're putting together a 4x100-meter relay team, he might only be the 4th fastest, but he's still got it. You know what I'm saying? He's still got that pace. So, for me, if he's on the pitch, he can make a big difference. I just hope he gets to that rhythm and that peak. It wasn't an easy time for him at Toronto. He didn't get the minutes at Forest. Forest have gone on and made the Premier League. So there's a lot of factors there, but I still think he can play a massive pivotal role for this team in Qatar.
Just really quickly on Richie, a lot has been made of his club journey, rightfully so. John Herdman told me Richie Laryea's first camp. I remember John saying this to me inside BMO Field. He's like, this Laryea guy's changed everything for us, because he's a player that likes to play forward, play his style. And when he came into the team, all of a sudden you had these attacking wingback options that they never had before. So Laryea was part of the transformation, very much so, of John Herdman's Canada side.
Let's take a look at Alistair Johnston, another name who became a household name during these qualifiers. And now here he is going to the World Cup. I'm curious, a lot of these players too, as much as they love playing in Canada, he plays for CF Montreal Major League Soccer. It's still a dream to play in Europe. Do you think Alistair Johnston could use the World Cup to really showcase his stuff and make that pivot?
Yeah, I do. He's going to get a wonderful opportunity. And I think, look, the caliber of players he's going up against, when you look at the left-hand side of Belgium and Croatia and Morocco even as well, I don't think it's going to, be really damaging for his career if he has a tough time against some of these players. But certainly if he thrives in those scenarios, when you're going up against a player like Eden Hazard, people are going to take notice. So I think people are starting to take notice of Alistair Johnston regardless. I think he's an excellent young defender and will be a cornerstone of this team for the next decade and potentially even a future captain of this team. But certainly you can accelerate that process at a tournament like this, put yourself in that shop window when you're going up against world-class forwards who are running at you, testing you in combination and all of these different things. And if you're able to survive that, people will notice, and Alistair Johnston has done it at every step. We saw it. I remember in particular in Hamilton, there was a one-on-one moment with Christian Pulisic, and Johnston won the challenge, defended it brilliantly. I celebrated that like a goal. Like it was such a good moment to see that young player go up against a top class opponent and just shut him down like that. And yeah, he's been another incredible story for this team and someone that you would never bet against, even against the types of players he's going to face at the World Cup.
His one-on-one defending has got so much better as well. So I'm so glad you brought that up quickly, because that's going to be essential when you think about the opponents he's going up against. Obviously, people talk about his brain and his tactical versatility, Andy, but how he defends in one-on-one situations is tremendous.
How about this for a teammate? A lot of players actually coming from CF Montreal here, the only Canadian team in Major League Soccer to make the playoffs. What are you expecting from Kamal Miller, Wheels?
Oh, I'm a huge Kamal Miller fan. After Canada qualified, beat Jamaica on the 27th, I saw him the day after. I'm like, Kamal, how are things? I'm like, people must be recognizing you now. He's like, I just took a cab to BMO Field, and the cab driver had no idea who I was. He was like, oh, did you see the Canada? He's like, yeah, I saw that. I was on the field. This guy should be a household name and face. This is what part of the process is all about. Little bit concerned he was laboring in the last game against Bahrain because, Derek Cornelius is his backup, but it's not really a like for like. He started off playing with Canada at left back. Now he's kind of on the left side of a 3. I think it suits him to a T. He's shown exceptional growth in recent years.
His partner in the middle, Steven Vittoria, and John Herdman kind of joked and said, I wish I had everyone on my back line who was his height, right? He does like taller players there. KJ, how do you think, he will fare? How do you think he's going to do up against the world's best?
Well, I think his role just becomes even bigger with the absence of Daniil Henry, because I think when you think about the profile of the way that Canada are going to play in that middle of a back 3 that sometimes will interchange, but for the most part, let's call it 3 center backs. He's the quarterback position in that player in that role. So I think Johnston and Miller will naturally get closer to him, the more difficult opponent they're going to be, but they can't get too close. They have to play their own way, and they've got to be able to be those pathways to pass the ball out. If they get too close to be a blanket to him of the security, he's got to be the one to say, let's be brave here. Let's be stretching that line. Now, people have been saying, can he play all 3 games? 3 games potentially is difficult for him at his age. He did do it in the Gold Cup. So it has been done. And now without Daniil, I think that's what's going to be asked of him. Now, that will be the plan initially. We don't know how many points Canada are going to have after game 1. We don't know how many points they're going to have after game 2. But at the moment, I think going in, you've got to be versatile. They have to plan for him to play and start all 3 games in the central defense in Qatar.
All 3 of those center backs, KJ. I think they all have to be able to play all 3 games.
Let's take a look. I guess so. We have some comments coming in right now. Middle of the defense is going to be the real test. Hopefully the scheme supports them. Quality they'll face is concerning. And as we look at another defender who's been named, Derek Cornelius, I'll continue with this theme here, Ollie, and what McNorth is writing. Positional concern, is that, if you're John Herdman, do you have most of that when it comes to your back line?
Probably, yeah, just because I think the depth has kind of been destroyed over the past few weeks, firstly with Kennedy going down and now with Daniil Henry as well. So I suspect, especially when you talk about Vittoria in the middle of the defense, I think Atiba Hutchinson is probably now the backup as opposed to anyone else. And they'll put someone else in midfield. So that, I think, is a bit of a concern. Atiba is a wonderful, wonderful player. I don't think you particularly want to see him in central defense in this tournament, and starts to stretch the team in other ways too. But Derek Cornelius, in terms of, the backup and depth options, is probably the one with the best chance, I think, of getting on the field. He's playing at a good level in Greece. He's always, I think, performed well when he's put on the Canadian jersey. Probably is kind of the reserve option for Kamal Miller on that left side of the 3, but I think could potentially fill in the middle as well. So he's probably the next man up, I think, when it comes to that back 3.
All right, Joel Waterman, guys, I'm already seeing a lot of people chanting CPL in our comments section. Paul C's writing in, Forge FC, who are we? There are a lot of people here who are Canadian Premier League fans, and they are really proud to see Joel Waterman make this. But there are also people asking about, who's the biggest surprise in making the squad. For me, I'll say Joel Waterman, but I don't know where you rank him there as far as surprises, KJ.
Yeah, undoubtedly, it's the biggest surprise because of the pathway that he's taken, right? But again, this is a credit, first of all, to the system that is in place with the Canadian Premier League that gave a player an opportunity. It's a credit to everybody around Joel, his family, but in particular for him. He went to the Canadian Premier League. He was brave. He challenged himself in different positions. And this is the other thing for me. He's not a safe defender. He puts himself in situations where, yes, he can fail, and he's okay with that. Mentally, he's very, very tough and very, very strong. Again, he's just another good guy. And that's really, really important within this squad. and then obviously playing regularly for CF Montreal and playing well on a top-class team is important, right? So whether he was number 26 and only got in today for Daniil Henry or not, he made sure that he was on the radar of John Herdman. So if an injury came up straight away, John Herdman is absolutely crushed, and we all are for Daniil Henry. But right away, it's like, well, okay, I've got Joel Wortman. By the way, he's played way more minutes this year than Daniil Henry for a top-class team in Major League Soccer, making a big difference, and combinations with Johnston there on the right-hand side and Miller on the left. So, look, I don't think we'll see many minutes for him, but if he needs to step in and play 15, 10 minutes here or whatever, more importantly, he's a great squad player. And this is the thing, when you construct your World Cup roster, 16, 17, 18 players are going to play. What are the 8 or 9 guys going to do? They're like pawns on a chessboard. They protect everybody else. They play the position, stay in the game, just take care of everything. Don't cause trouble. Don't go knock on the manager's door, say why I'm not playing. You've got to be good soldiers, and that's exactly what you've got with Joel Wortman. It's a fantastic Canadian soccer success story, Ollie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that as well. Isn't it nice that we can finally say about a Canadian men's national team player and a World Cup player that the system has worked for them, you know, and has given them opportunities and allowed them to get to this level? We've told so many stories over the years of players where the system hasn't been there for them. They've had to go abroad. They've had to scrap and claw and fight just to have a professional career. And now we can actually look at a player and say he benefited from college soccer, from semi-professional soccer, from the CPL, and now going to MLS. Like, we're finally putting things in place in this country where players like Joel Wortman are being discovered and getting opportunities, and now going to a World Cup is an incredible way to cap it off.
Yeah, great little debates going on here as well about CPL and just how it is the new pathway in recognizing talent for the national team. And Jay Rami seems very confident that the first goal for Canada, by the way, which would also be their first ever at a men's World Cup, is going to come from a CF Montreal player. Hey, you know what? Not crazy to think with the way Ismail Kone has been playing, but we'll get to him in just a moment because we do have one more to get to on defense, and that would be Sam Adekubi. Wheels. This is a guy who's already known for the leap, right? We're going to see it here after Kyle Larin scores.
Legend.
Bank leap. It's so great. And he also scored such an incredible goal in Hamilton when Canada took on the United States as well. What are you expecting from him?
When we're asked about players who have had the greatest rise over the course of World Cup qualifying, no one's stock has gone up more than Sam Adekubi, a player that was playing in Norway. The level, it's a little bit hit or miss, maybe not proving himself, being a little bit inconsistent, not being able to play back-to-back games for the Canadian men's national team. Now you can't take him off the field. Like, you literally can't down that left-hand side. He has been an absolute rock. I'm thrilled for him. He's gone the long road to do it, but he's arrived and he's here, and he's going to play a huge part in terms of the processes, the rotation, the tactical setup for Canada. Him in that role, it's vital, it's essential, and there's no one like him in the team.
He was the reason why no one talks about Alphonso Davies playing left back anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Not Alphonso Davies, it's
Love
him. Because he played 13 out of 14 qualifiers, and he was brilliant, as Wheel said. Every time you expect him to make a difference. And by the way, he will not be intimidated by the World Cup. He plays in Europe. He's playing really well at the moment in his club team. He brings width and pace to this team as well. So, look, I think it's fantastic that he's come along into this. And another example of when, you know, players are playing at a high level, another player comes in and he's got to raise his level as well. Because if he didn't, he may not have even made the squad. Everybody else rising their level, he came in and Herdman and others pushed him to reach new levels that maybe he never even thought he had in himself.
I just want to see him score a goal because I love his celebrations from the leap too. We didn't show his celebration in that.
It's Erling Haaland. It's Erling Haaland. We've talked about this.
It was the meditation. Yeah,
it did, and it was a lot colder that day too.
Let's go to the middle of the field, gentlemen, in the El Capitano and Atiba Hutchinson. So it's great to see him just recently back with Besiktas, because prior to that, we hadn't seen him play since June. It was always a belief that he was working hard to get back and that he would be on the team despite the lack of playing time. But I guess my question, Ollie, is because of that lack of playing time, are you starting him in that game against Belgium?
I would personally love to. We're going to have to wait and see, right? And we'll see against Japan what kind of role he has there. But I just think this is one of the greatest players in the history of the program. This is a top-class midfield player, still incredibly at 39 years old. I think if he can go 60 minutes for you, you absolutely put him in the starting lineup because of what he can give you. And this is going to be the moment where I don't get emotional over a lot, but when I see Atiba Hutchinson lining up in a World Cup match for the national anthem, I'm not sure what's going to happen, because this is going to be really special to see someone who, is given what he's given to the national team and had almost nothing in return over the years. To see him in Qatar playing a World Cup game is going to be something really special.
You're such an emotional guy, Ollie. Come on. I see it all the time.
Can I just read? EM has written, Atiba was onside. I'm assuming he's talking about the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
What was that, 2007, where he scored the goal? See, it runs deep. First of all, that just goes to show how long Atiba's been representing this country. So, yes, I can understand your emotions, Ollie, but there are also people who are just not letting it go. Atiba, KJ, was onside.
Yeah, of course he was onside. There's so many. We've all got so many Atiba stories because we've all been blessed to be involved in this game for so long, right? So, I always go back to, I think I did an interview with him in Vancouver in 2017, and I'm a big World Cup nut, as you know, I'm a big World Cup historian. And I remember telling him then, like, if you make it to the 2022 World Cup and you play on the pitch, you'll be the second oldest player to ever play in a World Cup behind Roger Miller. And he looks at me, he just laughed, right? Because it's just like, at that point, no one thought Canada was going. No one thought Atiba Hutchinson would still be playing in 2022. And yet both those tracks have gone side by side. It's not just Canada have made it to the World Cup. It's that Atiba Hutchinson has also made it to the World Cup. And of course, they come intertwined occasionally. But the fact that that's both happened is fantastic, because Atiba, I think many people would have said, okay, if Canada was somehow to do this, would play a bit of a role, but would he be ready to play at 39 again to play in this? And as he said to me in one of his interviews, I said to him, what would it mean to you? He said it would complete my football journey. And here he goes. He's about to complete his football journey and make history. So I'm with Ollie. If he can play that game, there's scenarios you have to play in your head where after 55 minutes, if they're down a goal, you throw on someone like Osorio or Kone to chase it anyway. If you're still in the game at 0-0 or you're somehow winning it, you put Piet on and you try and find a way to. So there's different scenarios that you can see. I'd love to see him start, but thinking Wheels, if he's going to start 3 games, I think is a bit too much to ask, because he's played 1 game since June.
They play at noon. I haven't seen if he's in the 11 for Besiktas today, but probably not. That's the thing at 39, having played 70 minutes against a third-tier Turkish side. I just don't think he's ready to step in and play at that level right now. I will say this, there is no Canadian player that the Canadian soccer community, people that have played, coached, been administrators within the system, are cheering for more than Atiba Hutchinson. And if he does play in all 3 games, he will be the Canadian men's national team first centurion, first player to reach 100 caps, which would be an amazing accomplishment. And doing that at a FIFA World Cup. And I don't think he will start, but I do think that that's realistic that he will play in all 3 games.
Yeah, Scorpio Canuck, you're so right. Atiba was all but retired from the national team until this golden generation came. It is very true. And John Herdman convincing him to stay. Stefan Eustáquio,
Eustáquio now.
He is getting so much love, and rightfully so, because as much as we love Atiba, I mean, his heir apparent in that midfield, someone who is the maestro on the pitch.
Maestro?
Maestro. Excuse me, I say maestro, okay? There's just certain things you have to say in the proper language.
I'll trust Andy on this one.
Stefan Eustáquio. He's the conductor. He is the guy who helps on offense and helps on defense. He is absolutely everywhere. And I know, KJ, at some point, we were looking at his minutes even during qualifying, and we thought, is Herdman ever going to give this guy a break? But why would you when he continues to do the things that he did?
Yeah, and when he did get a break, that was obviously down to COVID and different things about, I'm sure the story will come out one day about his missed passport. We'll move by that, but he found it, thankfully. But look, ultimately, he was the greatest Canadian player in the men's national team qualifiers. I know that Laren, got the goal scoring record and David scored the goals. Davies is the star. He was the best player for Canada in the World Cup qualifiers when Canada were the best team in the region. So arguably for me, the best player in all of CONCACAF during the World Cup qualifiers. He's that good. And I said it to him on the pitch. I'll repeat it again. We've waited for years in this country to produce a player like that. There's different profiles of different players that we have. And in Canada, bless us, we should never forget the 1986 team and so many other greats that have come along. This is a day to celebrate for everybody. But creating a player like Stefan Eustaquio, who's technically as quality, as brilliant as he is, who can finish as well, but can play and has got the brains as a 6, has the vision of an 8, and can also play pass like a 10. He's got everything you need. And there's lots of debates about what players are going to be doing in Qatar. If this guy's not playing 90 plus 90 plus 90, Ollie, Canada's in trouble.
Yeah, no question about it. I think, look, I've always kind of sided when we've been asked before who's the most important player to Canada in this team. And obviously the obvious answer is Alphonso Davies. But I think when you think about, there are other players in the attack, if Alphonso's not on it on a particular day, who can step up and produce and deliver those moments. And Jonathan David and Tajon Buchanan, Kyle Larin, and so on. If Eustaquio's not on it in midfield for Canada, then it's curtains, right? Like you're not going to win any games without this guy being absolutely brilliant in the center of the park at this tournament. So a huge player and an absolutely superb one.
To think of this as a player that did his ACL career, you weren't sure which direction it was going to go in Mexico. He didn't pick up his first cap until 2019. USA 4, Canada 1. Like he experienced that legendary 2-0 Canada win at BMO Field over the US from the bench. Now it's like, think about that, like how the team has continued to grow and evolve and is even a better version now. And this guy plays a huge role in it all and keeping this all together.
Wheels, I was in Orlando praying he went on the pitch. I was like, please cap him now.
Cap time.
Put him on the field.
No kidding.
Well, listen, from injury to, hey, which passport can he find? Because we know he could have represented Portugal, to your point. So that's another testament to players believing in Canada. And he does not buckle under the pressure, even currently right now in Champions League. And
just Leamington, Ontario. Shout out Southwestern Ontario.
There you go. So we spent a lot of time on Eustaquio, and rightfully so. And how about a player who it feels like there is a resurgence here with Sam Piette, again, another CF Montreal player. He said as much in September at that camp. He's like, I know a lot of guys say I'm the good team guy in the room. He's like, but I want to put my cleats on and I want to get them dirty and I want to be on the pitch and I want to show Herdman that I can contribute offensively as well. Ollie, how have you seen his game grow? And then, I want to go around here a little bit. And, who do you think Canada's best midfield, looks like? You're stacking it up, whether you're doing a duo, whether you're doing a trio, right? But let's just give a little love to Piette here.
Yeah, firstly on Piette, I think you're right, Andy, that his game has grown this year. And probably over the past 2 or 3 years, to be honest, there's been a process happening there where he's been evolving as a player. I think he's become more confident on the ball, improved his passing range, is less of just the kind of, win the ball, lay it off to someone else that maybe we saw earlier in his career. And he was very, very good and effective at doing that. But I think now he's able to play a more expansive game. So in terms of Piette, his role at the tournament and to get into that question as well about the best duo or trio, I think it is going to be situational. KJ mentioned this earlier, I think if you're trying to protect a lead in a game, we're going to see Sam Piette on the pitch, right? Because he's such a good ball winner, such a disciplined player, uses the ball in an intelligent way as well. So that will probably be the kind of role he's in. He could be in a bigger role in that first match, obviously, if Atiba Hutchinson, isn't ready to go from the start. I think it's probably Piette that draws in at this moment in time. So beyond that, like I said, it will be situational. Do you want someone like Kone in a particular moment in a game? Wotherspoon, Osorio, potentially, if you want to play a midfield 3, come in very useful as well. There's different combinations that John Herdman can use.
Mm-hmm. How are you looking at that midfield, Wheels?
I think there's a case that Samuel Piette starts against Belgium. I think you need ball winners in that game. I think you need reliable players. You're going to have to dig in defensively. It's not going to be easy. And Piette is a player that is prepared to suffer. He is selfless. He's everything that you want in a teammate. And I think just with the question marks around Atiba right now, Kone provides something different, and an argument can be made that he starts. But I think that Piette might be the ultimate option in that opening match. It's just my thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, there's some people who are loving it. McNorth once again saying, I want Piette on the field. I'll hustle all heart if Canada is ever in a position to close out a game.
Allows you to be a little bit more dynamic too. That's kind of how he's been playing with Porto. Mm-hmm. So I can see that happening. We'll see what's in John's thought process.
I just think if they're going to play a front 3, no matter how you line it up, if they're going to play a front 3, a 3 of 4 of Buchanan, Larin, David, and Davies, you have to play a more defensive-minded player next to Eustaquio. And so I just think the natural fit for me is Piet because of Kay's not been ready to play at that level yet, and he hasn't shown that. And, I think he's just the one who's been playing the most. I think people like Wotherspoon and Osorio and Kone can certainly play, but I think they would be considered a little bit more. I've got more of a depth for a little bit higher up the pitch. For example, if you wanted to remove one of those front three to pack a midfield of a three, not necessarily play them in a double pivot.
Yeah.
All right. Who's up next?
Agreed.
Mark-Anthony Kaye. This is a player who scored his first goals. It was a brace actually against Cayman Islands during World Cup qualifiers last year. We've seen his form dip a little bit, gentlemen. We've also seen his playing time dip more so too because of the elevation of Ismail Kone and what he's been able to do. But KJ, when you look at Mark-Anthony Kaye, what can he still bring to this squad?
Well, first of all, it has to be said that he was one of the first believers in all of this. Mark-Anthony Kaye told me in the semi-final against Mexico when they lost, and everybody is obviously distraught, conceding a 99th minute winning goal to Hector Herrera. He turned around and told John Herdman, we're going to get to the World Cup here. He knew right away that he believed a lot earlier than many. So obviously he's a big-time leader in this pitch. He struggled. There's no doubt about it. And I think that there's no way that we can really talk about it other than the fact that he's really struggled for minutes. He struggled to get to the level that he needs to get. He'll be disappointed with that. Lots of reasons for it. Injury. The move hasn't gone necessarily great. Toronto FC didn't play a meaningful game. The playoffs so for 40 plus days. So I think it's going to be very difficult to see him get opportunities at the World Cup. And we're going to get to Liam Fraser in a minute, but I think that's another reason why Liam needed to be in the team, just to add a little bit more depth in there as well. So look, when he's on the pitch and he's in his best level, he brings that terrific balance because he opens his left leg up. He can really bring that left-sided play in central midfield. But it's going to be a struggle for him, no doubt about it, because he's a good squad player, but he hasn't been at the level that he needs to be at the level for a while now.
Yeah, Paul C was writing a little surprised about Kaye, but I don't know who would be chosen over him. So he goes, but again, part of the brotherhood.
He was always going to go, Andy. He was always going to go. There was never going to be a threat with him not getting picked for me.
Mm-hmm. All right, next up, and there's a lot of players here in the midfield that John Herdman can choose from. And how about Jonathan Osorio? Because I think this one's really special, guys. We know that he hasn't played much. In fact, just 18 minutes since early September. He's been dealing with a concussion since August, and here he is now. Traveling, playing, running around, saying he's feeling great. He makes the squad. Ollie, what kind of performance are you expecting from a guy who hasn't played that much?
Well, it's difficult to tell, right? Just because of the lack of minutes and the lack of match rhythm. But I feel more confident about Jonathan Osorio in those circumstances than I would a lot of players. And I think we saw it in the Bahrain game. I thought he was one of Canada's better players on the day. He's someone who, at least not for several years now, I don't really remember seeing a game where I thought Jonathan Osorio is not at the pace, right? Like he's a little bit off it. He's not really sharp enough. And I think that speaks to the type of player he is. He's an extremely intelligent player. And he also has a technical level just in terms of his ability to take the ball in tight spaces that I think is above probably most players in this Canadian team. So there are things about his game that make you believe that he can certainly play a role. It's probably just difficult to maybe seeing him play as much of a role as we might have imagined a few months ago, given obviously the lack of minutes that he's played over the last few months.
All right, well, let's get to the man of the hour as well here in that midfield, because this is somebody who really made a name for himself at the pro level this season. And then when he made his Canada debut, this was a guy who sometimes looked young. And then, my goodness, did he ever turn heads in that September window against Qatar, and then in particular Uruguay, because that's world number 13. And he didn't even flinch. He looked really good. Here he is scoring the goal against Bahrain. That was just a couple days ago. Wheels, what do you make of what Kone has been able to do just to break out and have the spotlight on him?
Well, John Herdman noticed Ismail Kone for the first time watching One Soccer and the Scotiabank CONCACAF Champions League back in February. Crazy. When he scored against Santos Laguna. This was real. This was the first time that he announced his arrival. Then the first Canada camp he went into was the final camp during qualifying. So it's been a meteoric rise. Look, he has physical and technical attributes that few players on this Canadian side has. I think he's just about ready to be unleashed. I understand this whole, is he ready or not? If Canada really is going to be fearless, they need to play him because he could be a difference maker in the team. I understand the inexperience, but screw it. That's been kind of part of the Canadian story the entire way through. I think he has to play. If
you're going to be fearless at this tournament, it means gambling, right? And it might go wrong. But we need Canada are going to need to do that if they're going to upset the teams they're facing.
Where would you play him though? That's the key. Is like if you think about where is he going to play, right? That's the only thing I would say. I know exactly what you're saying, but we know that call it whatever you want, 3-4-3, 5-3-2, 5-2-3, whatever you want. But are you going to play him as a 2 next to Eustaquio? Because I think that's an incredibly bold and brave decision, and you're probably only going to do that if you're chasing the game.
Probably,
we're going to get into like what the strikers look like, KJ, but it surprised me a little bit that he kind of played underneath the number 9 against Bahrain, and potentially that could be an area if you're going to have to be forced to take off one of those attacking players based on who you're playing in this World Cup. Perhaps that's a role that suits him. We'll see.
A little bit of a timeout here, gentlemen. A lot of people showing love, and we just played or just showed Ben Kaminga saying that he feels Kone should get at least one start. Kone Eustaquio should start. They want to see them together. But a lot of people are commenting, KJ, as we go a little bit bigger picture here, right, against Belgium. And they're looking, I guess, at the youth. They're looking at the speed. We haven't even gotten to the forwards yet for Canada. But between the youth and the speed, even in that midfield, yes, that's right, I called Atiba young, but he's still got some wheels. They keep thinking that, Canada is going to do well against older defenders for Belgium. KJ, your thoughts on that?
Well, undoubtedly, it's an area of strength for Canada because they are young and they're fast and they're blessed with pace. That will be something that Roberto Martinez and his coaching staff are obviously going to be preparing their squad for. And undoubtedly, where Canada's strengths are is in attack, and when Belgium's is their weakness is in defense. So that is a completely fine storyline. But it's still Belgium and it's still Canada in a World Cup. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the reason why they beat them, guys. You might get 1 or 2 chances against these guys where you might get the right side of them. You might get in behind with them. You might be able to exploit them quickly in a transition. You've got to be ruthless and take that chance. Belgium are going to have 60 to 65% of the possession of the game. That's just the way it's going to play out. So how you approach it, I think, what has been pretty obvious here is that Herdman has said that the team wants to play this way, and he's going to play David, Buchanan, and Davies, and Lared, 3 of them. So I think that's bold, but he's not packing the midfield, and I don't think they're going to be sitting too deep. Eventually, you get that way against a team with a lot of the ball. But to your points earlier about them being brave and bold, and clearly by playing to their own identity, I think that's what they're going to do. It might be naive, but it might get them a win, or they could get smashed. I think we have to just outline those possibilities.
I don't know what to like. That's how they played against Uruguay, right? They just they tried to go toe to toe. That I can't see them playing any other way. Thrilled for Liam Fraser, by the way, that he's part of this 26-man team. Hasn't been part of the Canada side in recent windows, but he did play key roles in qualifying, as well as providing the assist or the setup for a goal of the World Cup qualifying campaign. Fraser to David, a rocket, a missile down the I just look at him for what he doesn't do at club level. Liam Fraser, he always shows up for country. And this guy tore his ACL, David Wotherspoon, and was there to celebrate with the Canada team in that last window. And he was holding newspapers that were all over the Canadian national publications to bring back home. He's a product of Scotland and now a bona fide Canadian, and he's gradually improved as well. I just wrote it down. He's played since October 15th. He's played 210 minutes in his return from an ACL injury. I'm not sure how fit he will be, but I caught a little bit of him against Rangers a couple weeks ago, and he looked pretty decent to me. So he's a really interesting player. I'm just not sure how much he'll play in this window.
Oh, Junior Hoylett, who even John Herdman has said, you want to talk about playing with younger players. It's just injected youth into him. He looks faster. He looks stronger. Ollie, do you feel he's, played himself into having a significant amount of minutes at the World Cup?
Yeah, potentially, and it's an interesting one, right? Because I'm not sure if the move to wing back was driven by his club situation, his club wanting to try him there, or if it was driven by Junior himself. But I think it makes a lot of sense for him at this stage in his career, because the reality is, like KJ just talked about, the 3 or 4 they're going to pick up front there. Those guys are going to play, right, and they're going to play big minutes. So if you're a player like Junior Hoilett wanting to get on the pitch and see game time at the World Cup, yes, there might be a substitute role for you up top as a winger and an attacking midfielder, whatever the case may be. But if you want to really increase your role, potentially be starting games, I think he does it in that right wing back position that we've seen him play now all of this season for Reading and also in the September window for Canada. So his ability to adapt to that position, the way he's adapted to that position, the increased fitness, I think he's in better shape than he's been, for a little while. Those are things that have made that decision an interesting one, combined with obviously Richie Laryea, and not having such a settled club situation over the past few months. It could now be Junior Hoilett's position in that first game against Belgium. I don't think that's decided or settled.
I think
he's
starts,
certainly got a chance.
I think he's got
a good chance.
Yeah.
He's unheralded, don't you think, guys?
Yes.
In a way, not enough people talk about him because everyone talks about the youth and the stars. I think he's played in every game he's been available for Canada. He's played the last 10, including all those World Cup qualifiers at the end. Massive in the moments afterwards. He played in the Nations League. I'll still say no one strikes a ball, and I mean Jonathan David, Tejan Buchanan, Alfonso David. No one in this squad strikes a ball like Junior Hoilett. His finishing ability is first class, and he's become a leader and a mentor to these young players. Just a classy individual. I'm absolutely delighted for him. And I think he's going to play a lot. And I don't think people realize how much he's going to play for this team.
Agreed.
Love it. Mark P, by the way, saying, shock the world, get out of the group, go Canada. Could we see a Cinderella story like we did in 2014 with Costa Rica making it to the quarterfinals? As we make our way to the forwards here, Lucas Cavallini being named to the squad. KJ, what kind of role, what kind of X factor do you think Cavallini can bring off the bench?
Well, probably very little, and that's okay with him. I think he's understanding that, look, the quality of players ahead of him are enormous. This is the strength that Canada have got right now. John Herdman refers it to as New Canada, and that's because we've got legitimate stars playing in the top competitions in Europe. So Lucas is going to have a very difficult time getting minutes. What I'll say about Cavallini is that every single time he's asked to do something, whether it's play 20 minutes, 60 minutes, 5 minutes, I like my players who come on and make a difference right away. He doesn't take half an hour to get into a game. He's not a passenger. Everybody loves him, by the way. He's a great character. This is what you need when you build squads, whether he plays 0 minutes, he's going to make a difference. He's going to be a brilliant trainer. He's a great guy to have around. And it's not always what you can do on a pitch. The evidence, as jurors, we're going to see is 270 minutes plus in the World Cup. And that's all we're going to see. These guys are going to be in camp for 3-4 weeks. The amount of impact that these players can have is immeasurable, and we can't measure it when we don't see it. And this is a classic example of that for me with Lucas Cavallini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the players do love him, and he's that quiet kind of humor. When you just get to talking to him, sometimes he just slips in little dry humor there, so you could see where, again, he meshes with this team. John Herdman has been so particular about the personalities that he is using on this squad. Let's make our way to Cyle Larin. You just know it, right? It's just those little things, right? Cyle Larin, in that game against Qatar, he is the leading goal scorer for the Canadian men's national team. Lack of playing time, that was the storyline around him, Ollie, heading into that window in September. And then he goes and scores a goal. Happens to be the nice silver goal as well, number 25. He also says he's not concerned about the lack of playing time that he's getting with Club Bruges teammates alongside Tejan Buchanan. Do you think that's a good sign, Ollie, that he's just feeling good?
Yeah, I think probably the most interesting player to speculate about in terms of what their role is going to be at the World Cup, because on the one hand, you have, likely a front three, and you have 3 players in Buchanan, David, and Davies who are playing at a very high level and playing week in, week out, who maybe become a natural choice in those positions. Cyle Larin, on the other hand, has struggled for minutes with Club Bruges. We know that move hasn't worked out as he would have liked it to. But we also know that when you pick Cyle Larin to play for Canada, he generally scores goals, right? Like, the guy has a remarkable goal-scoring record through qualifying. And over the last couple of years, whenever he has been called upon, he's delivered for his country. So speculating and figuring out, what exactly his role is going to be. Is it going to be more coming off the bench at this tournament than he's been used to in the past? Is there still a way to get him in that starting lineup without sacrificing the speed and the youth of the other guys? That, I think, is a really, really interesting decision that John Herdman's going to have to figure out over this next week.
Here's a big one for me on Larin. Him and David started 4 of the last 5 World Cup qualifiers in big moments, right? Now, we know Fonzie wasn't available a lot, and Buchanan played that maverick role that Davies would play. What is Herdman going to do against Belgium? Is he going to play David or Larin and the 2 Mavericks, or does he go back to his tried and tested? And I think that's how Kyle Larin can play and start the game, because Larin works harder than he's ever worked without the ball. And you got to have these guys who are willing to suffer. They're not going to have a lot of the ball a lot of the times. What are you going to do without the ball? Yes, he's a goal scorer. So for me, it comes down to, obviously, Jonathan David has to play. Alphonso Davies has to play. And do they pick Tajon Buchanan because of the pace and the terrify Belgium?
Yes.
Or do you pick Kyle Larin, who I think can work even harder and maybe bring that extra ability to score a goal, particularly from a set piece, which could be really crucial as well against that team? That's a big question, I think, for John Herdman in this match.
Yeah.
By the way, Alan Jackson saying Kyle scores our first ever World Cup goal if we do score. No, it's when.
Alan Jackson,
Alan.
Country music star Alan Jackson. Wow.
But I'm liking
the big
this.
dogs.
I think we need to take a little bet here of who we think is going to score the first goal for Canada. Liam Miller here. There we go. He's back up. We see him. Wheels, Liam Miller, and just kind of what you would expect from the Toronto, Ontario native.
He's still so young. I think that his better days will come in 2026. Still hasn't scored a Canada goal. He's been given opportunity. He's a depth player here, but still a really good player with a bright future. Like I said, I think he's 22 or 23. Like, he's still super young. So good on him to make the team, and we'll continue to follow his progress.
All right. Tajon Buchanan, the speedster who himself had his start of season delayed because of an injury, but it's okay because he played in that September window, looked good, has continued to look good as well for Club Bruges. How important do you think Canada's success, KJ, will be at the World Cup based on his performance?
Well, I think it could go toe to toe and hand in hand. To be frank, again, he's a remarkable talent, and we have to remember that the start of this qualification process, he was with the Olympic team. He wasn't ready to, people didn't think he was ready. And he's just shown that he can be ready. And without Davies and David really in that Gold Cup, it became his team. The attacking identity was built around Tajon Buchanan. And he's fearless. And for a shy guy off the pitch, sometimes he comes alive on it. And as I said earlier, if you're Dalic of Croatia or Roberto Martinez of Belgium, you're understanding that this guy he finds a way to get in games. And in the transition game, he can be ruthless. So if you're a back 4 or a back 3, if you're Croatia or Belgium, you're on your toes the moment he gets the ball, right? So naturally, you can suddenly see them dropping deeper with creating space for other players to play and involved in it as well. It's not always what he does on the ball. It's giving him the ability to make those runs, stretch the pitch, which Canada often doesn't do because a lot of the players come to the ball and create that moment of magic that may set up that space for Davies and others to be able to do the damage. So, look, it's so exciting for Canada to have a player like that, and his stock is only going to rise at this World Cup.
He's looked so comfortable in the Champions League. Sorry, Ollie, coming back from injury. The biggest question, and then you can take it away, where do you play him? Like in the Champions League, he played at that right wing back position. I have a feeling that he's more suited in this Canada side to play in the attacking 3.
Yeah, that's where I want to see him. And I just wanted to add to what KJ said about his stock rising. That's the one player I think could explode at this tournament. Like, people already know who Alphonso Davies is, obviously. They're starting to learn who Tajon Buchanan is playing Champions League football, but I think he has the ability to really take off at this tournament and for a lot of people to be talking about him afterwards.
Listen, it's going to be hard to crack some playing time as well up front, just given the firepower. And, we're going to get to obviously David and Davies already having spoken about Larin and Buchanan, but Ike Ugbo is another example, Ollie, of John Herdman convincing a player to represent Canada. So again, just, the little that you have seen of him in representing Canada. Surprised at all that he made the team?
Not surprised, no, because of the level he's playing at for his club. I think he'll be someone who is used in a substitute role. I don't think there's any question about that, given the other attacking players are more established. But he's a player who has shown a real nose for goal, perhaps as much as anyone in the squad, not named Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. So he's got a role to play. I think he's one as well where we're really going to see the value of securing Ike Ugbo's commitment probably over the next couple of years more than we have done this year. I think he's definitely going to have a big role to play for Canada going forwards.
All right, Jonathan David, the man who is right up there among top scorers in Liga, playing for Lille. And here's the thing, guys, I don't want to ask about, how do we think he's going to do at the World Cup? Because I don't think we have any doubt that he will perform. He's already shown that. He's a team player. You go back to that window as well in November in Edmonton where he gets the only goal against Costa Rica, but the next game he's on the bench and he's like, I'm A-okay because I trust John Herdman's plan. No. The real question here around Jonathan David, Wheels, what's with all these rumors? Do you think he makes the move to Manchester United?
Let's worry about that come January. All I care about him is playing for Canada in this World Cup. And what I like about his goal scoring, his numbers are ridiculously good, unbelievably good what he's done for Canada. But what doesn't get told enough is the work that this guy does off the ball, defensively, checking back, dropping into deep areas. He does it all for this Canada team, and he kind of leads that press from the front. And these are the little things that are going to be so crucial for Canada at this World Cup.
Kadam Kane, apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. I would love to have Jonathan David for Everton. I feel like there's going to be a good little battle.
Yeah, of course you would.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, mate. Good luck with that.
Well, there's a lot of rumor. I mean, I don't know, Ollie. This is big. And for a lot of the players, too, and they've said it, Jonathan Osorio was very open about using the World Cup as a chance, not just to obviously experience the World Cup and represent his country, but they want European eyeballs on them, too. I think they're already on Jonathan David, Ollie. But we've speculated for quite some time on our show, One Soccer Today, what would be the next best move for him?
Oh, it's going to be higher than Everton. Sorry to any Everton fans out there, but I think that ship has sailed. The only reason he's going to leave Lille at this point, I think, is for a top club in Europe. It doesn't have to be Real Madrid's, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, but certainly the next tier down from that. I don't think there's any sense in moving on from Lille unless that's the kind of offer you're getting. And the season he's putting together in Ligue 1 right now, one of the top scorers, right up there with Neymar and Mbappe. That interest is going to come for him, I think, regardless really of this World Cup. But certainly this is one way to accelerate it pretty quickly. Yeah,
I agree with that. No disrespect to Everton, a wonderful club, but I think you can figure out your manager before you figure out who's going to play up front for you. That's all I would say about them. Look, Jonathan David is a really unique, special talent that Canada are very fortunate to have, and I'm so happy to see that he stayed with Lille because I think he's got better this season. First, two things from me. One, we're seeing a lot of his goals we're showing here. His left foot has improved unbelievably over the last year. He's finishing on the left side. So when he goes and posts up one-on-one with the defender now, they know that they can't push him simply to that one side. His left foot has become such a dynamic force of what he can do. His finishing ability, his one-touch finishing is off the charts. The other thing, too, is that this is a player that would benefit from the World Cup playing now. His best months in his career are August and September and October. He sometimes gets a little bit tired. He's certainly done that with the European season the last couple of seasons. He is in peak form right now. So he starts the World Cup in the best form of his life. And traditionally, many players that excel at the World Cup come into that form. They don't just suddenly switch it on and switch it off. They come into a World Cup because they're playing so well. And he is playing really well at this moment.
And KJ, it's such an advantage, him not playing Champions League football this time around. Some of these players have been playing weekend, midweek for the past 2 months. He's just been playing once a week. It's actually put him in a really good spot heading into this World Cup.
Gentlemen, it is the star. I mean, we have a lot of great players on this team. It's not to take away, but the most recognizable face, of course, is Alphonso Davies. He's feeling good. We know we were all holding our breath. We're still probably a wee bit nervous after he pulled up in his last match with Bayern, clutching his hamstring. But who could forget, this goal against Panama? And even though he missed some time with injury and COVID during the qualifiers, every time he was on the pitch, he absolutely wowed. And you said it earlier, KJ, Adekubi is a reason why we're also not talking about Alphonso Davies as a left back, but he just looks so good up the pitch as a forward for this Canadian team. It's got to be something special, KJ, where everything Canada has done so far, first time in 36 years, it's great. but to know you're also going to the World Cup with a legitimate superstar who has won things. His trophy case is already stacked. What kind of confidence does that give you?
Well, it gives us tremendous confidence because, there's been a lot of discussion lately about, Bayern Munich and the connections to Alphonso Davies and all, with his injury concerns. What we should say is that what Bayern Munich have done for this player is he gets a master's degree every single week in terms of football, high-level football commitment to winning. And that's the great thing about being around Joshua Kimmich and so many stars. I'm not going to go on and name the whole squad, but they are absolutely relentless in the ability to win every game and know how to win it. And so that's what Fonzie's built like. He was already like that anyway, but he comes into the World Cup with really commitment to winning every single time he's going out there. He will look at Belgium and he will look at Croatia very differently than other people will look at Belgium and Croatia because he knows he's better than some of those players and he knows he's beat them before. And so he will go out there with that mentality to think, yes, they can win. They can win these games. And that mentality then becomes very contagious. So I do think, look, we're going to get into this a lot before. I think World Cups are genuinely based on players. A lot of the world game is based on managers, club game, a manager, what can he do? The World Cup is based on players. Players are the stars of the World Cup. The managers and coaches are not. But I do think it's one of the biggest priorities and one of the biggest things.
No stoppage time.
We had a little happy finger there, KJ. Someone was very excited to play that clip, but as we're talking about Davies.
It's a great clip. If you're going to get interrupted, that clip works.
Totally fine with me.
Yeah, if you're going to be interrupted, let it
Much
be Alphonso
rather listen
Davies.
to him than me anyway.
for a little bit of context, Alphonso Davies was dealing with injury, so he couldn't be with the team in that game against Jamaica, which was held at BMO Field in Toronto, Ontario, where they officially clinched. So that was him watching on Twitch. That was his moment, knowing that it was solidified that Canada was going to the World Cup. A lot of people here obviously giving some shout outs here to Davies. So, pretty impressive. We know what he's been able to do for this team. And it was a special moment for everybody. Too bad he couldn't be with the team in Toronto in that game against Jamaica. But he's going to the World Cup, baby. And there are some people who have also been saying, let's talk about the staff. Well, yes, you got to give a lot of people behind the scenes some credit here. Number one, of course, is the coach, John Herdman. I had a chance to speak to a lot of the players earlier today, guys. And to a man, they all kept crediting John Herdman. John Herdman in their belief to not only qualify for 2022, but their belief to finish first in CONCACAF. And now when I asked them, is this the accomplishment that you've made it to the World Cup? They said, no. John Herdman has instilled it in us that there are so many other things. So we're not happy just being here, even though we know what we've been able to do. But it's right down to the first goal, to the first result, hopefully the first win, and then trying to get out of the group. Ollie, this is someone who took over in 2018, had success with the women's team as well. How much has he changed the mindset of these players?
Well, completely, I think, right? And, part of it obviously is that the stars have aligned at the right time for someone to come in and do that. And we can see that in the talent that's in the team now, the belief that just having players like Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David gives you. I think we all probably could have said a couple of years ago that, there's something happening here. There's something coming here in terms of this men's national team, in terms of potentially it being the most exciting era for this team that we've ever seen. But then you need someone to come in and really harness that and execute that, right? And I think John Herdman has proven to be just the ideal fit to take a group of young players, to tap into the confidence that they have in themselves, the togetherness that was the potential for togetherness, I guess we should say, that was there in the group when you look at how these guys are bonded. And to harness that into a special team. So yeah, he did it with the women first. He's done it with the men now as well. This is someone who has changed the course of Canadian soccer. I don't think that's too much to say at this point.
Cheetah Bench, John Herdman, next coach of the U.S. men's national team. No, not. Don't
He wants to
even go there.
No.
All right, so guys, Joel Waterman, who played in the Canadian Premier League 2019 Cavalry, made the jump to MLS, has been named to the roster. Art writing in, Lucas McNaughton's snub was disappointing. We'll talk about that in just a second, but here's what John Herdman actually had to say about the CPL.
A huge message to young Canadians in this country that, you know, the pathway to the World Cup is non-linear. It's a dynamic approach. You have to keep believing. And what I believe the Canadian Premier League has done is created a foundation for players in this country to keep believing, to keep pushing. And, you know, I think we all hope that our Premier League becomes, you know, a top league in years to come, in decades to come. And that's been started by a group of pioneers now that in 5, 10, 20 years' time we'll be celebrating a lot more.
All right, KJ, I'll hand the floor over to you with regard to what he just said about CPL and Lucas McNaughton picking up his, you know, first cap against, you know, Bahrain. Do you think that was a snub?
No, I don't think it's a snub, and I don't think anybody would think it was a snub on Lucas. I think ultimately Lucas gets the opportunity. I think if you talk about it from a snub, you talk it from a negative. And look, it's a positive that he got on the pitch. It's a positive that he got his opportunity. It was his first cap. You know, it was his first moment that he'd ever even got a chance to play for Canada. So to get a chance to play in a game like that when a lot of European players weren't available, he'll never forget that moment. You know what I mean? But this was never going to be a time for him to play in this squad. I don't think he was, you know, ultimately it's great that he's had an opportunity. He's come through the CPL. He's come through an amazing journey himself, became a champion. But no, this is not a snub at all for him. It's just a great opportunity that he got to play for Canada and ultimately get close to that roster. The other thing we should talk about is what John just said. And I think it's so important that people like John continue to champion the Canadian Premier League. You know, there's a lot of unfortunate negativity in this country when it comes to this sport around about where money is going at the moment. And the people who are creating that league are sometimes are on the dartboard of people. And it's incorrect. You know, ultimately, if this sport is going to succeed in this country, we have to be behind the Canadian Premier League. And that only links to what's next for the women. And the women are going to get theirs and they deserve it tomorrow. In fact, they needed it yesterday. And that will come. But the people who are going to be behind that are the same people who are going to be who have been behind the Canadian Premier League before. As John called them, pioneers, people who are brave, people who didn't care about losing money, people who put their money forward and did things that other people haven't done for years, people who decided that it was time for action, people not talking, people doing. And that's why Joel Waterman's going to a World Cup. This is why we have our Canadian Premier League. This is why we have One Soccer, who are brilliant at showing the games. And this is why we're starting to become a football country in this country. This is the culture which is we create. This is what you need. This is what we need in 2026. We need players to come through this pathway. It cannot just simply be down to a league based in the United States where three teams who do very well get an opportunity to play in it. It has to be more than that. And this is just the start of it. And long may that continue, Wheels.
Exactly. It's about the players. It's about coaches. It's about referees. It's about administrators. We have not had an organized professional structure in this country ever before. And guess what? It takes investment. It costs money. I kind of laugh when people, you know, throw out all this money that's supposedly in Canadian soccer. I would love for someone to point to where that is, because it requires investment right now for hopefully future returns. And the short-term return is the fact that two players that are going to the World Cup have spent time playing in the Canadian Premier League. And, 2026, that might be 4, that might be 6. Some coaches might be involved. Some administrators might be, physios, like all of these things matter. And there needs to be a breeding ground for it all. So that's what we're trying to build right here. I think that people involved to seeing how the sausage is being made are kind of aware of it. To everyone else, we just, the one thing that I want to see over the course of the next, 3-4 weeks is the sense of pride and positivity shines above the negativity. And we as a Canadian soccer community love to take one another down. We love to be our own worst critics and love to point towards the bad and not and fail to take time to celebrate the positive. We're going to a World Cup. KJ, you and I have covered so many World Cups before. Like, we understand like what this actually means for the players, for the country, for everyone involved. And I just hope that we all just take some time to kind of really celebrate how far we've come and where we continue to go.
Ollie, last word to you.
I just think on that topic, like we've come so far in the last few years in this country. I don't think people always appreciate that and acknowledge that how much has been achieved just in a few short years here. So, you know, I find it a little baffling at times the way in which people want to, you know, throw that away and can't see the woods for the trees. I understand that it's not perfect. I understand we have a long way to go and no one's above criticism, but you know, we have taken massive strides in this country in so many different ways. The Women's League is the next big one we need to take. I think we all know that. But we've come a long way and achieved a lot just in, you know, over the longer term, but in particular, just over these last few years. And that shouldn't ever be taken for granted, I don't think.
Well, gentlemen, before Canada kicks off against Belgium on November 23rd, begin their World Cup campaign, they do have one more game to go. That will be against Japan, and it'll be right here on One Soccer, November 17th, 8:45 a.m. Eastern time. That's where we'll see all the guys playing with their European clubs now also be available to John Herdman. They weren't in that 2-2 draw against Bahrain. That was a lot for the MLS players who are out of season. You know, their seasons had already ended, so that was really for them.
Big game.
But then be sure to join us on that November 17th match. Thank you to everybody who's been tuning in to this YouTube Live. We've been seeing your comments, some great questions. We were able to get them up. Hope you're as excited as we are. Join us on November 17th to watch them one last time before it all kicks off for real on November 23rd. That's KJ, that's Wheels, that's Ollie.
Oh, Canada, oh, baby. Let's go. Oh, look at this. Good name to the squad.
2070
that was
left.
Trillo.
That is sneaky. That was
that
a
headband.
Sneaky pose.
Brett Michaels-esque. Look at that.
Look at the size of that logo.
That is a massive. What is that? Vaughn Azzurri? What is that?
Yeah, that was Vaughan Lightning, baby. Vaughan Lightning in Maple, Ontario. And do not diss the headband. Who's that?
Oh, look at this guy. Trophies only.
Bigger than that.
That's it. Gonna bring the mushroom cut back.
So cute.
No. That's the bowl cut. Your mom just put the bowl on your head and like just went around.
What you didn't see was the rat tail in behind Andy.
Oh, a little Roberto Baggio. I see that. Gentlemen, Armin, that was sneaky of you putting those up. Guys, always a pleasure. Let's keep talking the footy here on One Soccer. We'll see you later.